Hi, this is Bill Raymond. This image up here on the top of my website is called a hero image or a banner image. It has text, has a little bit of a gradient, and it has some text with a button in front. This is not something that's easy to do, and I took a long time to figure it out. I'm going to show you a way to do it using CSS grids. It's new, it's modern, it feels like you're writing HTML and not doing a hack. Let's go ahead and get started. Here is one of the most basic examples of how to create a hero image. This is on W3 Schools, a great site, by the way. And you can see there's an image with some text on it. And there's a little bit of a gradient so that this text kind of pops. And you can see that the HTML is pretty straightforward. You know, you have the hero image div and you've got some text that says, I am John Doe and I'm a photographer with a button that says hire me. Okay, that's cool. But now let's take a look at how the code actually works. What we'll find out here is that the hero image needs to use CSS. And inside that CSS, we do a background image with a gradient on it. And so rather than having the image that we want to display in our HTML file, it's actually in the CSS. Now, granted, this is an HTML file with CSS in it, but normally what you're doing is you're creating a separate CSS file. And why do you want to have the image of the photographer in the CSS file? You want to have it in your HTML file. Now here's another problem that we have is that after you place all that text, then we have this area here where we're telling it how to display the text in the button. And here we see that we have absolute positioning. We're setting exactly where the text needs to be located. When you read this as a person that's not too familiar with HTML or CSS, this all seems very weird. Why are we doing a background image? Why is a gradient coming first? And then why do we have all this absolute positioning? Well, there's a better way to do this, and that is using CSS grids. And I'm not going to walk you through CSS grids in great detail here, but what I am going to do is show you how to use them to kind of avoid this. And by the way, this is one of the easier sites that I've found. There's plenty that have JavaScript and all sorts of complexities in order to just create a simple image with text on top of it. Ultimately, what I decided to do to get this hero image to look good, and by the way, this works on IE as well, there's an image that I found, right? And then I have this gradient rectangle that I put over the image. And then finally, there's text and a button that goes over it. This button, in my case, happens to just be a href with some styling around it, but the idea is that there is something that looks to the user like a button. Now, right now what I did is I put the gradient fill over this, but I wanted to point out why the gradient fill is so important. Look at how this text is all washed out. You can hardly read it. The people's faces are kind of in the way of it. But watch what happens when I actually make this gradient display a little bit more. There. Now the image kind of goes in the background a little bit, and the gradient takes over, and now it looks a little bit better. So let's take a look at this. I'm just going to go ahead and choose this box here and choose reorder objects and check this out. So this is what we have now. We have the image with a semi-transparent grayscale gradient over it, and then we have our content layer, our HTML content layer. So that's what we're going to create right now. First, I need to get my hero image. So I'm just going to go ahead and search on unsplash.com. And I'm going to say meeting people happy and find that image that I was working on before. This is a great image from Priscilla Dupree's. I don't know if it's Dupree or Dupree's, but I'm going to go ahead and download that folder, that file rather, and I'll put that onto my desktop. To get our development environment set up, we're going to use Visual Studio Code. So you can go ahead and download that. Just search for Visual Studio Code. It's totally free. and we're going to install two extensions. Now the first one, I'm going to go to extensions here, and I'm going to search for live server. And all this is doing is going to essentially allow me, as I write my HTML code, it'll refresh in the browser. Without this, I'd have to go into the browser every single time and press a refresh button. That's all I'm doing is just installing a neat little tool that will automatically update the site. And then the next thing that I want to install is I'll search for the word SAS, S-A-S-S, and you'll find this live SAS compiler. Now, I'm going to show you how to do all of this in basically standard HTML code without anything special. However, I am going to use this SAS compiler because I have a tendency to use this sort of more robust language for creating CSS or cascading style sheets using this. But as you'll see, it automatically converts it into standard CSS. So I'll just go ahead and install that as well. And now I can come back up here to my Visual Studio Code environment and notice that on my computer I already created a CSS Grid hero image folder that's right here, and I've already opened up the folder and there's nothing in there. So we're going to start from scratch. First up, we'll create our first file, which is the index file. So I'll just type index.html and press enter. And inside the code, now that it's saved with .html, I can just type in a handy little utility thing here, which is I can just type HTML:5 and then press a tab key, and that creates the basics for my website. Okay, now I'll just type in hello world here as just a simple piece of text just to make sure this is all working. I'll save the file, and then I'll just right click on index.html and choose open with live server, and there's our hello world. So now if I say hello again and save, you can see hello again just automatically appears here. So that's why I installed that live server, and you can see down here it's informing me of the port number. Okay, cool. So the next thing I want to do is create a style sheet. So I'll click new again and I'll type style.scss. Now remember, we're just going to be using standard CSS, but just in case I go and do something I don't remember is SCSS instead of CSS, I'm using this. So anyway, I'll go ahead and type style.scss, and then down here at the bottom of the screen you'll see this watch CSS or watch SAS button. I'll click that, and you can see that anytime I write my SAS code here, it will automatically update the style.css file, and that's the standard HTML CSS code that everyone's familiar with. Okay, cool. Finally, I need to link the index file up to the style sheet. So I'll just do link, link, and then I will type in style.css. You never link to the SCSS file, you just link to the standardized CSS. Okay, so I'll go ahead and save this, and everything looks fine. What we'll do is just go to the style.css SCSS file. I'm just going to call that the SAS file from now on if I say that again, and I'll just type body, and in brackets I'll just say background color : red, and save that, and you can see the background color changed. I'm only doing all this just to make sure everything works, so I'll just go ahead and clear out that body style text and save once again. I'll also go into my index file and remove the hello world text because we are going to put in our code now. I take that back. Before we start coding, we need to bring in our hero image. So I'll just go ahead and drag and drop that file from my desktop into here. I'll also rename this file to hero-image. There we go. So now we're all set. I'll just close all this down, And for the time being, we're just going to focus on the index page. So just to kind of make this easier to view, I'll close this down and zoom in a little bit so we can just focus on writing the code. The first thing I'm going to do is create a section, and the class name is going to be top banner section. So one of the cool things about Visual Studio Code is I can just type section, because that's what I'm creating, dot top dash banner dash section, and that will be my class name. And when I press the tab key on my keyboard, you can see it set that all up for me. I'll just go ahead and press enter so that we have some space here. Whoops, and there we go. And now what we're going to do is inside this section, we're going to create a div called banner-image-div. So div banner-image-div. Again, I'll press the tab key and press enter. So this is essentially going to be the container for our hero image, or banner image in this case, and then this is going to be where we put the image. So that makes sense. Let's just go ahead and just call this img.banner-image, and then inside this we're going to give it the source, and the source is hero-image.jpg, and we can also say this is a banner image in the alt text. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and save this file, and you can see right now the browser is displaying it, but it's huge. You can see how massive this JPEG is. Now at some point you're going to want to optimize this, but I'm going to use some tricks to just kind of get this to display the way I want in this demonstration for now. Okay, so if that's our image, remember we're layering things. So the next layer that we're going to put down is the overlay. So here I'm going to call this div.banner-overlay-div. Okay, so this is going to be the container for our overlay. And next we're going to come over here and just, oh, by the way, so here's what I want to point out. The overlay is essentially going to be a gradient, but we're going to focus on that on SCS using SAS, so, or CSS, so we don't need to worry about that right now. The next thing that I need to do is create the banner text div, and this is the container that's going to contain all of the text that goes onto the site. So I'll just call this div.banner-text div. And I'm sure that I'm overusing divs and people can complain about that, but this worked for me. Now, because I want all of this text to kind of appear together, I want to treat anything that's contained in this content as one thing, I'm going to use the span command. You do not need to do this. All of your content could be in different div classes, and you could set up different CSS grid rectangles, but let's not get into that right now because you'll understand it more after we keep going here. So I'm going to do span.banner-text. There we go. So at this point, really, we haven't put the text in, so we might as well just do that now. So I'll do p.banner-h1-text, and then I'll type in my text. Remain relevant in today's technology-driven economy, or something like that. Okay, I'm sure I've misspelled something. I'm going to put in another p tag, and this is going to be the banner body text, and in here I'll type learn how Agile can give you a competitive edge. All right, so that's my sort of secondary text, and then finally what I'll do here is create the button, but I'll just call that p.banner-btn, and I'm actually not going to use the button HTML code. I'm just going to create an href that will look like a button. So I'll just do a.banner-btn-item. So that will create an href for me, which is nothing but a link. And inside the reference, I'll just do https://cambermast.com. That's my company. And then finally over here, I will type get started. And I can even create that little cute arrow, and that arrow is defined with just a little escape code here. So I just type and #8594, and there. Let's go ahead and press save now and make sure that that looks good. Now remember, we're going to take this image and shrink it down, and we're going to overlay a gradient, and then we're going to overlay our text. But right now, all of this is not laid out the way we want. So if I scroll down to the bottom of the browser, we can see we have, there is that text remain relevant, learn how Agile can help you, and then get started. So we have the basic layout of our HTML now. Okay, before we leave this file, let's just recap what we did. First, we created this section here that essentially is going to be the container for our banner image, our hero image. And then we have the image itself contained in a div, and we've got another div that's going to be the overlay with the gradient. And then we have one final div that's going to display the text. So granted, I have big long names for all these things. I did that so it would be easier to understand when you come back and look at the video, but that's the idea. So let's go ahead now and focus on formatting this the way we need to. I'm going to head over here to the style.scss file, and we'll just go ahead and organize ourselves again. There we go. Now remember, we have that top banner section. That's a big bounding box, if you will, around the entire hero image or banner image that we're working for. So the first thing we're going to do is go .top-banner-section and section. There we go. And inside there, we're going to say display::grid. So this is really important. This is telling CSS, this display::grid is telling CSS, telling the browser that the content is contained within this section is going to be a grid. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is the following. I'm going to type grid-template-columns. I'm going to say 1FR, or stretch to the full frame. So stretch from the far left to the far right of the browser, essentially. And then I'm going to go to grid-template-rows, and there I'll type 350px. And so essentially what we're saying here is that whatever the content is within this section goes the full width of the browser, but it can't be higher than 350 pixels tall. So you could make this one frame, and it goes all the way from the top to the bottom of the browser. You could make this as tall as you want, really. So I'm choosing 350 from my particular site, and I'm going to type grid column gap 0px. I think that got replaced with something else, but that's okay. And then grid row gap, 0px. Yeah, these have been replaced with something else, but at the end of the day, you can see I'm not really using them anyway, so I don't think there's going to be a big deal there. All right, so I'm going to say align content center, and also justify content center. Okay. because I'm going to want the content to be in the middle of this image of the banner. So all the content that goes in there just automatically gets centered left and right and up and down. And now I'm going to go here and go dot banner dash image dash div, and I'm going to type grid dash area colon 1/1/2/2. All right, so now here's where we get into what's a little bit more confusing with grids. Is you can actually name grid items, which is really cool, or you can use grids by numbers. Now, I am not going to get into all of the detail about how you exactly you set up a grid in this particular video. Here's what I'm going to point out instead. If you come over here to your browser and choose CSS Grid Generator, you're going to find there's a number of grid generators. I really like this one, and this is by Sarah Edo, and it's really cool. And so what it does is it allows you to decide how you want to lay out your site. And so grids aren't just for a banner. Grids can be used for laying out your entire site or doing some sort of like a magazine style layout. You can do some really amazing things with this. So you can see here that she already has a basic setup here. We only have one column and one row. And the column here should be one frame, and the row should be 350px. That's what I just typed in my code right over here. And now what I can say is, you know what? I need a div tag. That's the one, and I just clicked in here, and it says .div1. That's the one that's going to be our image. But I also want an overlay, so I'll just click on here again. It'll give me a div2. But I also want to put my content with that agile text in the button. So I'll click that again and I get a div3. And then once I'm done, I click please may I have some code, and you can see I'm using the code that was provided by this generator. Okay, so you can really get into learning about grids, but if you just want to do a simple layout like that, you can use a grid generator. Okay, cool. So that's going to be our image, and I'll just put a little comment in here. This is the image, and then I'll do dot banner dash overlay dash div, and I'll type grid area. If I can type 1 1 2 2. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and do that one more time. Dot banner dash text dash div, and I'll just go grid area once more. 1 1 2 2. And let me just move all this stuff up so it's kind of all together here. So this is the gradient, and then over here this is the text. All right, cool. Let's just go ahead and save that. Oh, and I'll just go ahead and fix this little extra semicolon here and save my file. Now, essentially what I've done at this point is I've said, hey, display a grid that's the full length of the browser, that's from left to right, and also make sure that it only goes 350 pixels high. Now what's interesting about this is I've also created these 3 divs, which we don't really see right yet. But what's interesting is that the image is actually still really large. Why is that? Shouldn't the image at this point, we have the banner image and it's saying put it in the grid area, and it should be 1 frame long and 350 pixels high? Well, it turns out that the image by default can stretch outside of the grid. So what we actually need to do is tell the banner image to fall in line basically and follow our rules. So I'm going to go dot banner dash image, and this is the image tag itself now. And I'll just scroll down here, and we'll get maybe those there. Okay. So for the banner image, we're also going to say display grid. And then we're going to say min-width is 350 pixels. Now, why 350 pixels? I thought we were talking about height. Well, actually, what I'm trying to do is make this a responsive banner. And so I'm just saying to the browser, you can let this image shrink as much as you want, but not any further than 350 pixels. So that's the width, okay? That's the left to right size of the image. And then I'm going to say the width in general is 100%, meaning fit it within this one frame here, okay? But don't go any further than that. It has to stay at 100%. Don't go flying off the range and displaying so far off the page there. Okay, cool. The next thing that we're going to do is set the height. So we'll just say for the height, make that 100%. Now the height is 100%, which means it's going to be the height of the container, which is 350 pixels right here. Okay, so let me just go ahead and save this. And now look, we're starting to get somewhere here. Well, now we have the image and the text is laying over it. We want that, okay? So our little banner text div grid area thing worked here, and our banner is looking good. However, look at the banner right now. It's really stretched out. And especially when you're doing kind of debugging on a site and you're playing around with different ideas, maybe you won't have a perfect image that's exactly this number of pixels high and that number of pixels wide. So instead, what you could do is just say, you know what, browser, please resize it, but also only crop rather than stretch the image. So now I can just say object-fit, and I'll say cover, and watch what happens when I save this. There. Now the image is its essentially same aspect ratio, okay, and it put the image in here cropped. So that's cool. So now it's starting to look pretty good. We still have this text here, and remember with the text we also need to put our gradient overlay over the image. So because we're going to have white text and it's not going to look good without the gradient overlay. So let's go ahead and create that next. So here I'm going to type .banner -overlay -div. And remember, this is the gradient overlay. Now, I'm going to copy and paste some code in here. And I know that that's not something I like to do. As you know, it's not something I like to do. But what I am going to do is just quickly walk you through it. It says display as a grid, make the maximum width 100%, so one frame, okay? And then also make the background black and create this linear gradient with a 60-degree angle going from black to white, where the black is about 30% invisible and the white is 100% invisible. So let me explain to you how I figured this out. I just went over here to this, let me get here, CSS Grid Generator, and I think it was cssgradient.io it was. And you can see it actually has a kind of cool interface here. So, you know, it might have multiple stops for the gradients or what have you. You can just kind of close those. You know, you can make the gradient 60 degrees like I did. You can select the gradient, you know, make it basically 0, which is black. Select the other gradient, make it white, which is 255 or this hex code here. And then when you select the white, you can just go ahead and say how visible it is. So you can see here right now the white is covering, and then as I go over here you can see these little check boxes. So I'm actually making it sort of like slightly invisible. So I actually made this 100% invisible, and for the black I actually made that something like 30% visible. So you can kind of play around with that. And then when you're done, you can just go ahead and copy the code from here. Let's see. So yeah, here we are. So here's the code copy, and then you'll have something that looks something like mine. Of course, mine looks slightly different, but it's really not that different than what I just showed you here. Okay, so now that we've created the overlay, let's test that. I'm going to go ahead and save. There, now you can see that the image is a little bit darker and then it gets lighter over here. You can kind of see that gradient occurring here on the image. And again, you can play with how you want this to look, but this just gives you the idea. And finally, what we need to do is lay out the text. So that's what we're going to do next. As with all these items, we have to worry about the div that's basically the container for all of these items here. So I'll do dot banner dash text dash div, and I'll say display colon grid. And then inside the grid, we'll say align items center. And I'll click save. But before I save, watch what happens to the text here at the top left. There. Now it's aligned to the center. So all of our text is going into the center of the box. Now, if you'll recall, when I started this video, I showed you that W3 schools thing. Remember, we had to do all these absolute positioning things to get it to the center? Now this grid is going to center everything for us. Okay, so let's continue. And I'm going to say margin left, and I'll type 15 pixels, and margin right, and that's going to be 15 pixels. And what I basically want to do here is just create a little space in between the border of the image and where the text starts. And if it happens to go really long, I also want to have that border over here. So I'm going to save, and you can see now the text has been indented a little bit using that border. So just because you're using grids doesn't really mean that you can't use any other HTML code. I mean, there are some certain limitations somewhere, but that is totally normal. Okay, so now let's focus on what we're going to do with these three elements here. Now, first, I'm just going to set up the basics for how I want this to look. I'm going to just type .banner dash h1 text, and I'll type in the font size, and I'll type calc 10 points plus 0.15 view width. Now, I'm not going to get into this, but what I'm doing is kind of creating a sort of semi-responsive font here, where it's saying, yeah, you can get larger font, but you can't get smaller than 10 points. Okay, and I'll just continue here, and I'll say the letter spacing is a little bit wider. And watch what happens to the font here. You can see it actually changed a little bit in size, but also notice that it's going a little bit longer now because I want this font to be a little bit more stretched out. Rather than just changing the font size, I'm actually changing the spacing for the font. Okay, and I'll just go here and type in the font weight, is bolder. Text transformation is uppercase, and the color is white. There, I'll save that. And now you can see how this is sort of taking up a nice amount of space. It's really easy to read because we have our gradient in there. As a matter of fact, let's come over here and just temporarily kill the gradient and save this. You can see how washed out that text is without it. So I'll just put that gradient back in, and now it's a lot more easier to read. And the image is still getting its point across. It's trying to say that, this is sort of a, we're not taking ourselves too seriously here. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the body text. So .banner body text. And again, do this whole font size thing, which is calc 10 point plus 0.15 W. And then I will also do the margin top, and I'll say that's 0.5 EM. So what I'm doing is saying, you know, push this down just a touch. So I'll save that, and even though the font, you can't really see it that much, but you know, it's there. And then finally I'll just make this color white, and I'll say text decoration none. Save that. So this is looking good. We kind of have the layout we're looking for. We still have this button to deal with, so let's go ahead and address that one next. First, there's this paragraph we want to deal with that says get started. I know it's hard to see on the screen right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and go .banner button, and that's the paragraph. It's not the button itself. And I'm just going to say the margin top is 1 EM. And I'm kind of doing this just to show you how you can kind of modify all these items. So you are probably going to lay things out the way you want, but I'll just go ahead and save that. And then finally, what I'll do is come down here and actually work on styling this get started text. And if you'll recall, that's .banner button item. And now what we're going to do is just go the font size. And as you may recall from the previous items here, we're going to do a calc. And this time it's going to be 8 point plus 0.15 VW. And then I'm going to go into the padding at the top. And that will also get calculated. And I'll do 0.5 EM plus 0.08 VW. And when I save this, you're not really going to see much happening. Of course, the font size changed a little bit, but again, it's really hard to see. The padding here is to enable this to look more like a button. So I'll just continue on and do the padding bottom. Actually, what I'm going to do here is just kind of copy this so it's easier to do. So I'll just paste this in, and the padding bottom will be the same, and the padding left, and the padding right. And those are all the same. So again, you're not really seeing too much happening over here. Now let's get into it. We're going to make the color blue. I'll save that. You can see the getting started text kind of went to that purple to blue. And then we'll do the text align is center. I'm going to save that. You're not going to see too much happen right there right now. And then we're going to do text transform. And I'm going to make this uppercase, so the button's always uppercase. I'll save that. Get started is now uppercase. And then we'll go ahead and say the font weight is bold. I'll save that. Getting started is becoming a little bit more clear over there. And then finally, the border is 1 pixel and solid and white. Save that. Now we see that there's a border there. That's cool. And finally, we'll set the background color to white and save that. There we have a button. Now, this is not a real button. This is just an href. So hrefs can change when people click on them and things like that. So one of the nice things about using Sass here is I can say and:link, and then I'll just say text decoration none, and then I'll save that. You can see the underline went away and get started, which is cool. And then finally and:visited, and we'll just go ahead and make the text decoration none there. And really the only way to test this is to click on the link when it actually works and come back and verify that the color is the same. So this is just saying, hey, make the color essentially the same as it, the color will always be this dark blue with the white background. So that's what we're saying here. All right, so that's kind of it. That's how we do it. Now, I did mention that this is supposed to be responsive. So let's just take a look. I'm going to kind of grab the browser now and resize. Remember how this image was massive, but it's been cropped now using that object fit option, this right over here, object fit cover, okay? And so it's cropping and resizing and always going to look good whether we're on a small device. Notice that we see more of the image down here, but as we stretch out, we see less of it, but we're still kind of seeing the people. That's good. We're still kind of getting a good image all around. Now, after you're done kind of debugging your site, you're probably going to want to get the perfectly sized image, say that it doesn't go beyond, let's say, 1600 pixels wide or whatever. But at this point, you actually have something that is responsive. The font doesn't kind of go crazy. It always stays in the middle, even if it wraps. So that's good. So that we basically have the layout the way we want to. Now, the other thing that I am going to do now is just point out what we have. If I just scroll out here and cover up the browser for a minute. Let's go back here and open up the index file to the side. So really what we have are two files here. We have the HTML file, which is basically just this section right here. Okay, so we have the bounding box, which will become a grid because it's defined right here on the CSS. And then each one of these divs becomes a grid, and that's all defined here as well. So it's really actually pretty straightforward after you get used to it. We did a lot of typing, but really all we're doing is laying it out this way. Now, let's say that I didn't want this gradient to be over the image. I wanted it to be over the text. All I need to do is take this and move it down underneath the text and put it there. And then the gradient goes over both the text and the image. Obviously, I don't want to do that, but what's happening here is the CSS is saying, here is what you need to do, create a gradient for this. But I can put the gradient anywhere I want. So essentially what's happening is it's the browser is reading, okay, first put in the section, inside that section put the image, and then above that image, because it's a grid that's on top of each other, put the gradient, and then above that put the text. This whole area right here where I have this div with the span, all you need to do is create the div. Then you can figure out how exactly what you want to lay all this out. You don't need to do this span thing with the text all centered. You can lay this out however you want if you're familiar with HTML and CSS. Finally, I do want to point out that there is actually a CodePen for all of this, so if you want to play around, feel free. I also, just so you are aware, when you open this, the image is going to change all the time. So as you, for example, I don't know, let's just change to the details view in CodePen, you'll see another image get selected every single time. So that's just using a random image from the Unsplash site. But you can see that object fit-cover actually does a pretty good job of cropping it as you're doing your editing. And again, once you're done, you'll want to have an optimized image rather than some of these massive images that get downloaded. So yeah, go ahead and play with that, copy the code, use it, and I hope this was useful for you. Thank you for watching this video. If you want more like this, please like, comment, and click the bell to support my channel.